I like the elements that made you feel uncomfortable, the elements that just weren't quite there when it comes to people like, is that person sane? Like, what's going on with this guy? His eyes are going two different directions. He's talking about eating rats. What's going on here?
I found a lot of them.
A lot of what?
Beach rats.
Drive-By Movies, my name is Blaze.
And my name is James.
And never have I ever seen Messiah of Evil.
They're coming here. They're waiting at the edge of the city. They're peering around buildings at night. And they're waiting. They're waiting for you. And they'll take you one by one, and no one will hear you scream. No one will hear you scream!
Messiah of Evil is the horror classic from 1973. It's about a young woman who goes searching for her missing artist father. Her journey takes her to a strange Californian seaside town governed by a mysterious undead cult. So again, this is a movie I actually wasn't familiar of, but I recognize the poster right away. I don't know if I recognize it from just seeing like cool vintage like horror film posters like in a book or something, or maybe I've seen it play at the New Beverly, like just on their little monthly marquee or something. But it's definitely a movie I recognize, but the title just didn't ring a bell. But Blaze, like, what made you want to watch this movie, and what'd you think?
So I originally found out about this movie from, I think it's the Shockwaves no, it's not Shockwaves podcast. I think it's some of the people from the original Shockwaves podcast. It's like a Blumhouse podcast about horror. They do a new podcast called Colors of the Dark. I think Fangoria does it, but I definitely recommend anyone checking out, if you're into horror movies, check out Colors of the Dark podcast. I love that they talk about a lot of different movies, and usually they'll do like either lists or just like broad topics, like best movies from the 80s or 70s. I think one of the most recent episodes is like best 80s sequels, just stuff like that, where it's like cool lists of a bunch of different films. And they usually try and pick movies that you haven't really watched recently or haven't heard of, or maybe you haven't seen but you know about. So this was one of those. This was on one of the lists that they had called best 70s horror movies. And when I think about the 70s too, it's funny because I don't remember like that many 70s. There is a lot of 70s horror movies, but at the same time, like, I feel like 70s horror was very, 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 very different from 80s horror, to a sense where it's an entirely different thing. And it's actually kind of interesting because when I decided that we're going to watch this movie, I wanted to pair this with Conjuring, because we did The Conjuring on Monday. I wanted to pair it with another kind of devil movie, or just like evil type of like weird evil movie, and this obviously was the better film of the two, and it was from 73 actually instead of 2021. So I really enjoyed this movie. I'm curious what you thought about it though.
When I think of 70s movies, I for the most part think of like more actually international films. I always think of movies like The Wicker Man or Suspiria, like of course all the Italian 70s horror films also. The only like U.S. filmmaker I really like followed from the 70s, of course, is like George A. Romero. Like we got Dawn of the Dead within the 70s and stuff, and he also had a few other successful horror films back then that we all know and love as well too. This movie though, like, just it was very different but also influential. I wouldn't necessarily call it scary, but I did want to give it credit for how uncomfortable it made me feel.
Marshall. Parker's got to be paid for his tune. Not just with money.
The score is a pretty unsettling. There's also two different versions of this movie. Usually we talk about like where we can watch the movie and stuff, like whether or not we need to rent it and stuff. I just searched it on YouTube, and there's a beautiful HD version that's on YouTube and stuff. And then I was like, oh wait, it's also on Amazon though too. So I watched the Amazon version, and that one's not as crisp of a version. And also though, there was a musical score song with the opening chase sequence with the father. And so I was actually a little confused on which one I should watch, because there was no score in the YouTube version. It was a little unsettling, actually. So, like, I'm not sure which is the official original one. I kind of assume the Amazon one is, just because you're not really allowed to upload full-length movies onto YouTube. But, yeah, you can watch both movies on either app for the most part. But when it comes to like being uncomfortable though, like the bizarre like music that I was talking about on the one on Amazon that I ended up watching, like it's a little weird and upbeat and stuff, kind of something that you would hear in like, I guess like The Wicker Man, like we were talking about earlier, about a month ago, I'd say, because it was our first time watching that movie. But then also a lot of the like weird like screams that you hear within this movie and stuff, and a lot of the weird like just like bizarre kind of conversations that are going on with these main characters and stuff. But yeah, I did really enjoy it and stuff. Like I wouldn't necessarily call myself being scared, but I liked the overall story and just like the way it like made me feel. It's very atmospheric.
Yeah, definitely. I think this film captured something that I'm going to relate this a lot to Conjuring, and I'm kind of using The Conjuring, not the original one, but this most recent one, The Devil Made Me Do It, because it's what we most recently watched on this channel. But also, it's kind of a good interpretation of the entire like popular horror genre at this moment in time. Like in 2021, 2020, this is kind of what major studio horror movies aim to go for, aim to be. It's very heavy on a lot of these elements that, you know, a lot of films that are from either that universe or even films from other studios that are kind of competing with that same element. I would say Conjuring has the big piece of the pie when it comes to horror movies from major studios. And it seems like those films always try and gravitate towards the really heavy color palettes, really kind of moody, dark, atmospheric, a lot of CGI. There's a lot of things that go into those movies to make them movies that kind of seem like they're competing with each other. Where you get a movie like this is 73, obviously, that has a lot of elements that maybe it's not terrifying, maybe it's not scary, but I also didn't jump at the new Conjuring movie. But I rarely jump at home. I got a blanket. I'm good. You know, I'm ready to party. But when it comes to like Messiah of Evil, I like the elements that made you feel uncomfortable, the elements that just weren't quite there when it comes to people like, is that person sane? Like, what's going on with this guy? His eyes are going two different directions. He's talking about eating rats. What's going on here? That's the kind of stuff that I feel like if you were to bring these kind of elements that definitely aren't tasteful, but into these modern films, that could give it this kind of weird, unsettling tinge that I feel like most of the time these films are so polished, and the unsettling stuff is just so overwhelmingly what you expect, essentially. Where in this movie, there's a lot of stuff that wasn't stuff I expected off the get-go. You have a lot of these people that are, well-dressed and kind of living this interesting life, but then you have a lot of these people that are like these weird cultists at the same time that kind of invade this town, and they're crying blood from their eyes. Just a lot of weird, unsettling imagery that I wish a lot of the modern horror films would take notes from and make stuff that we haven't seen before, instead of every single CGI of somebody's mouth opening and gaping open as far wide as they can and them screaming. It's an image I've seen in every horror film in the last 10 years. So, right. And it's always overly done with CGI that it's not scary anymore, you know?
Yeah, and at least there's like payoffs within this movie too, because like you are kind of wondering like, wait, what is this cult like all about and stuff, and then the fact that like it gets into like vampires and stuff. Like I was very satisfied because I didn't know that's what we're getting into. Like maybe you caught on early, but I didn't at first though, just because like I liked overall like the whole element of like that feeling of like her being watched throughout the movie and stuff, just because she doesn't know what she's getting into. She's just looking for her father. Then we're getting all these people just like who seem to know her father but are very like quiet about it and stuff, and you're just like, what are we getting into? And I liked a lot of the set pieces used in California too. Like I'm not sure where exactly it was shot in. Like a lot of it did look like LA, but I could be wrong too. But I liked the idea of just like set pieces used during the day and it still being somewhat creepy and stuff, like especially with the like final chase beach sequence at the end. And kind of similar to Shockwaves the other week, that was like one of the last movies we did on Never Have I Ever, kind of ends on a similar note too, of just like that whole like narration. This one was done a lot more better. I thought like it wasn't so much like narration on like this is exactly what I'm thinking right then and there while I'm thinking about in the past and stuff. Like I kind of like the narration a lot more in this movie. But like just the overall like kind of ending of just like her going crazy and stuff, and like, you know, trying to like, you know, she's stuck where she's at. Like that was like a home that they ended up putting her in, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and this was actually filmed in, I think it's Point Doom, but they changed the name to Point Dune for the film. It's a little bit shy of north of Malibu. So this was filmed in California and just north of LA. And I'm pretty sure it was an indie film. I mean, it definitely appeared to be an indie film at the time, but it essentially was like a failure when they made it. I don't think they finished the edit of it. They didn't finish shooting maybe a couple scenes or anything, so they didn't finish editing it together. And then later on, another company bought all the footage and edited it together and essentially made a film what a lot of people thought at the time. I think, what is it? Yeah, a French guy had edited the film together, released under title of Messiah of Evil. And even nowadays, like in 2003, essentially for the horror genre, the British Film Institute hailed this as a rare work of cinematic genius, which obviously isn't a title to be thrown around. I kind of agree that this is such a weird... It's almost like how I see like Night of the Living Dead is like it's such an anomaly of a lot of the movies that were coming out at the time. I can't think of anything in 73 that was just kind of so eerie and strange and weird and not quite like everything else that was being made at that time. And it was an indie film, which also gives it points because it's kind of made a huge step in terms of like whether people have seen it or not, they haven't discovered the gem that it truly is. Right.
And it doesn't really like do anything to where it's like trying to like do anything beyond its budget. Like a lot of those movies back then in the 70s, like, you know, when I think of the 70s, I think of more like monster movies and stuff and all these big grand movies and stuff. A lot of movies didn't really try to work with what they had and stuff, like, because even Dawn of the Dead, like that movie is a classic. I think everyone's gonna hail that as one of the best horror films of all time, but a lot of it doesn't hold up. But a lot of the stuff in this movie I thought hold up and stuff. Like I liked that like they showed like very little and stuff, even in its gory moments. So like I remember the opening sequence still stays with me, just like even though it's like just like a body with a bunch of blood all over, you don't see the actual cuts and stuff all over and stuff. It's still effective and stuff, and like I really was glad that they worked with what they had. And yeah,
definitely, yeah, this was a pleasant surprise. I think I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it actually was. It was definitely way ahead of its time, and I think that was the main thing for me. Like I could see this a movie kind of like this in the 80s. Obviously it would be a little different, probably a little bit more commercial, maybe a little more fun, because this is definitely more of a dreadful time, but it's so pleasantly surprising because I wasn't expecting something this good, coming out of that indie market, especially in the 70s, and something that had so many weird, really disgusting and like shuddering things about it, you know?
Right. And I trust Blumhouse, actually. Like, you brought up that Blumhouse did a podcast on this movie and stuff. Like, this is a movie that I don't think that many people, like, know about and stuff or bring it up and stuff. Like, I'm glad someone did. I can see that this movie definitely was influential. But, like, I could see this, like, playing well, like, modern, to, like, with a remake and stuff. And like, I love that. I know that Blumhouse throws out a bunch of stinkers every year and stuff, but it's like intended to cater towards a younger PG-13 audience, and that's what funds all the rest of their movies, like like for like higher budget and stuff. So like, you know, every once in a while they throw out bangers like Whiplash or the new Halloween movie and stuff, like, and then Invisible Man. So like, you know, like I'd love to see them use those like throwaway poopy movies to like fund movies that they're passionate about, like with remaking and stuff. And like, I would love to see like this one being one.
Definitely. I think you could do a really cool movie nowadays, like a remake of this, essentially. I think, yeah, you could alter this to make it, you know, relevant to right now, but also still keep a lot of the things that make this movie kind of fun and, you know, just up the gore, obviously, because that's something that obviously now with all the technology we have when it comes to gore, a lot of this gore is reminiscent in this film of, you know, Dawn of the Dead, where it's like this bright red blood that's kind of like giallo, but also kind of it's definitely more whimsical in a sense. I've always felt like that bright red blood does have a place, but modern filmmakers do not use it anymore because it doesn't seem realistic. They always go for that super dark, you know, colored blood. But
right.
I would like to see a comeback for that you know, really light colored blood that's just so cartoonish. I think it has a place in cinema.
Yeah, I think it's been a while since we've seen it. I think the last movie I think of we could have saw it in was like maybe like Sin City or something. But yeah, I'm definitely, let's hashtag it, bring back a bit bright red blood. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of my favorite movies have it. Even like, I mean, even Kill Bill. Wouldn't you say the blood's kind of? I might have to go review the tape on that one, but I feel like some of that over emphasized gore is like, seems, you know, so cartoonish in a sense, where it doesn't seem
right. I wouldn't be surprised
realistic.
Yeah, with that one being like more splattery. I remember with like the head decapitation sequences, like it's over the top splattering and stuff. Like, I can't remember the red exactly and stuff, but compared to like Hateful Eight and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I remember those were a lot more darker reds and stuff. But that movie definitely like had that whole vibe of having bright red and stuff. So like, thank you, Tarantino. I know he kind of worked on Sin City for giving bright red blood, but like, let's see it back in horror films again.
Definitely. Anyways, guys, if you want to support the show, go ahead in the description box below, click that Amazon affiliate link, watch the movie on there. I think it's free right now. I think it's on Prime. So go ahead and watch Messiah of Evil on there, and go ahead and leave a comment. Let us know if you've seen the film before. Get that conversation going.
Yeah, please do that. And another way to help us out is by smashing that like button. If you haven't already, if you're not, like, please subscribe and click that notification bell to get all of our latest updates.
We're available, guys, on every single social media: TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever your favorite social media is, we're on there. So go check us out. Our tag is usually at Drive By Movies, but anyways, it's down there in the description box. Anyways, guys, tune in next week for a brand new video.